A warm welcome to you and thanks for joining us on the Gavel. I'm Terry Ikumi. The National Assembly is scheduled to resume on Tuesday, the 18th. The concern going into the election year is what will lawmakers focus on in this last lap. The President of the Senate seems to have laid that bare: security. Take a listen.
The security situation still begs for more attention. We'll give a lot of attention to the security situation. We have appropriated about $1 trillion for our security agencies and armed forces. Now it is for members of the National Assembly to ensure that the procurement process by the armed forces are transparent and everybody there is accountable. And of course, we should do oversight as much as possible on the welfare of our soldiers, of our security personnel. They need to continuously be motivated. I believe that 1.5 years is a long time. In fact, in 6 months, we can make a difference by creating and sustaining a better security environment for our people. So I still believe that this situation can be turned around for the better. What is required is for political leaders to provide leadership, and then the security agencies and armed forces to do what is expected of them, and citizens to continue to pray and show support for our armed forces. Our revenue to GDP ratio is very low, and everybody will tell you, the economist will tell you Nigeria's problem is not debt, but revenue. So if that is the case, it means those of us in government must focus on dealing with the challenges of revenue generation, revenue collection, and remittance. So this year, we are going to have engagements with the revenue generating agencies, NPA, customs, FRS, and so on and so forth, on a quarterly basis.
This has always been the stance of the President of the Senate: query the spendings on security. And last year, the House of Representatives on its part began investigating the arms purchased by the military. But nothing has been heard of that since the death of the former Chief of Army Staff, Major General Attahiru Ibrahim. Now let's stay with security as we take you through some of the security-related conversations in the National Assembly last year. The Senate began working on a legislation which will impose stiffer punishment for illegal possession of firearms in Nigeria. A federal lawmaker, Senator Obasani, proposed an amendment of the Firearms Act, which is intended to address the proliferation of illicit small arms and light weapons in Nigeria and the resultant security challenges.
Provide for stipulated time within which the destruction of the unserviceable firearms must be carried out, except where there is a valid order to the contrary, court order to the contrary. To prefer an effective, coordinated, and sustained legislative strategy to address the underlying factors encouraging the circulation of arms, and concurrently block the outlets through which illicit firearms are proliferated.
In November last year, the National Assembly mourned the deaths of General Zama Zerkisu and 4 soldiers killed by terrorists of ISWAP during an attack in Askiruba local government area of Borno State. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Army, Senator Alin Dume, hailed the deceased for their exceptional display of gallantry in the military's fight against terrorists.
ISWAP insurgents attacked Askira town, and a general who was rushing to the scene was ambushed by ISWAP and killed along with 3 soldiers. And that time and day too, Saturday, we also lost the 2IC of the battalion operating in Askira.
Senators rose to honor the gallant soldiers.
Rest in perfect peace. Amen.
In December, the Senate also mourned the travelers killed by suspected bandits on their way to Guyana in Kaduna State.
The bandits were 12 in number with guns. They sprayed the bus with the petrol and then set it ablaze. And they refuse to allow anybody to help the people because they are holding guns. Anybody who attempted to do that was actually shot dead.
The Senate last year met with the heads of security agencies to find solutions to the security crisis in the country. After the meeting, which lasted for nearly 4 hours, the Senate spokesman said the upper chamber is expecting the executive to come forward with a supplementary budget for the armed forces.
We spoke just like high-level discussion on general challenges and requirements for us to have an efficient and effective security. The details of whatever will go into supplementary appropriation can only be worked upon by the Ministry of Finance, which is an executive arm, together with our relevant committee. And so we are ready to receive supplementary budget.
In the House of Representatives at the commencement of 2021, the Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, during his opening remarks, stated that every time a citizen going about their business is killed or kidnapped, loses their protection, loses their property or livelihood, government has failed in its obligation. According to him, the Constitution obligates all who swear to serve in government to do everything to protect the lives and property of all citizens and promote their well-being above all else.
The true test of government is in our ability to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. We cannot separate the goal of economic prosperity from the ambition to ensure that all our people live in a just society, free from abuse of power and protected by a justice system built on fairness and the rule of law.
In February, the House of Representatives charged the security agencies to expedite the rescue of the Kagara schoolboys.
The House resolved to condemn in totality the attack and adoption of students and staff of Government Science Secondary School, Kagara, Niger State, which occurred on February 17, 2021. 2. Mandate all service chiefs, the Inspector General of Police, and other security agencies to intensify efforts for the rescue of the abductees.
Less than a month later, 2 pastors were kidnapped, Bulus Yakura in Borno State and Polycarp Zango in Plateau State. The lower chamber intervened, asking the security agencies to ensure that both men were not killed, and weeks later they were released.
Worried by the continuous closing of 1-week period given by the insurgents, which expires on Thursday, the 4th day of March 2021, concerned that at the expiration of the deadline, anything can happen to Pastor Bulus Yakura.
In September, the House held a public hearing on the establishment of a commission on small arms. Representatives of the various heads of security agencies and relevant stakeholders were seated as the event was declared open by the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
I ask all of you to make full use of this opportunity to contribute your perspectives to improve these bills and protect our country in the best way we can. As I have always said, nation building is a joint task.
Nigeria has over 350 million small arms and light weapons out of an estimated 500 million small arms and light weapons in circulation in West Africa.
The Navy, however, expressed worry over weapons handling in neighboring African countries.
Average Chadian soldier has 20 to 30 arms underneath his bed. When he's broke, he brings it out and sells it for $30, $20. I am here, I am standing here, and I'm saying it.
The House of Representatives in 2021 convened its own special summit on national security. The Speaker of the House highlighted the importance of the summit, while the Senate President expressed concern about the procurement process of the military.
Today, at this time of our national history, when insecurity threatens the authority of the state and the foundations of our nationhood, when the activities of bandits, insurgents, and criminals of every stripe impede our efforts at progress and prosperity, we must confront the realization that our previous and current approaches to addressing the challenges of insecurity have not yielded the desired results.
The National Assembly should work hard, as it always does, to provide more resources. I also want to say that we must review the procurement processes by the security agencies.
Traditional rulers seized the moment to speak truth to power while calling for more action than talk.
I'll be very happy if anybody can raise up their hand and say, I can go to my area of constituents, my local governments, and I can stay there in peace for 1 week. Who can do it here? Including our gatekeepers. Who can do it here? Including the Senate President, including the Speaker. But you left the traditional rulers. You left district heads, the baales, to continue to stay there. And you are saying all will be well in this country. We are the ones facing these youths. We know their problems.
I think enough of these talks. Let's walk. Let's walk the talk. Because the more we sit here and talk, the more time we waste in taking real actions. Because we know the problems. I bet you can come back 3 or 4 months later for another security summit. We will discuss the same things we are going to discuss today.
The President's message was presented by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and the Chief of Defense Staff maintained his stance on the insecurity situation.
I am certain that we shall overcome, just as we have done many times throughout our history. However, success at this time requires that we set aside all other considerations and commit ourselves to a common endeavor in the national interest.
The leadership of the armed forces and the security agencies are mindful of the concerns that are being shown or that are being expressed across the country, and we promise that in line with the directive of the Commander-in-Chief, that we will take every measure necessary to bring peace to our fatherland.
The report from that summit has since been submitted to President Buhari for implementation. Security will definitely not be the sole focus of Parliament this year. So let's find out what else Nigerians expect the National Assembly to focus on. Here's an interview conducted by my colleague Linda Akigbe with a public affairs analyst, Sesu Akume.
What I'd like the National Assembly to do as soon as they resume in 2022 is to amend that section of the electoral law, the one Buhari capitalized on in order not to sign the amendment, to make it optional for political parties to either do direct primaries or indirect primaries, and send it back to him for immediate assent. That's what I'll expect them to do on the first day that they resume. So if they pass both, if they do the amendments and they pass it within a week or so, forward it to him to sign. Because
what if they insist on the direct primary?
They don't have the authority. They don't have what it takes. They don't have what it takes to veto Buhari, because if they did, they would have done that already. And from antecedents, they don't have what it takes either. They're just a rubber-stamped National Assembly. They can't do it. And many of us, me inclusive, many people are inclusive, think that they passed the National Assembly in order to, they passed the electoral law and forwarded it to Buhari, knowing that with that he wouldn't sign it, so that there will be a stalemate. So we're neither here nor there. They'll claim they did their own part and then push it to him. He would claim that because of that and give the reasons that he gave, which are not true, by the way, that direct primaries would cost 500 billion naira, which is not backed up by any facts, which INEC says it's not true. And then it won't be signed, just like we're here. So we're in a limbo. We're neither here nor there. So it should simply amend it and make it optional for parties. Parties that want to do direct primaries should go ahead and do it. Those that want indirect primaries should do it. Send it to him to sign it. Let's have an electoral act that promises free and fair elections from this year, because we're going to be having elections in some states this year and then for next year. That will be the first thing I want them to do.
We have entered into 2022. The National Assembly is on recess and will be resuming in a couple of days. What do you expect to see from lawmakers in 2022?
Make provision in the constitutional amendment for a referendum. We have a constitution that doesn't give the voice back to the people. But remember that this same constitution says that sovereignty lies in the people. And it is from we, the people, that the government derives its own authority through the constitution. That's section 4, section 14, subsection 2. And then it goes further to say the duty of government is security and welfare. But it already says in that 14 that sovereignty lies in us, the people. But we don't have a voice, because if we want something, we still have to go to 469 of them to determine it for us. And then maybe the state assemblies and so on and so forth. There should be room for a referendum. That would be one critical amendment they should have in this round of amendments, because they have series of amendments every 4 years. There's a problem with that. The other thing I would really like for them to do is to change that provision in the Finance Act 2022, which introduces yet another tax. That's the sugar tax, whereby they're taxing carbonated drinks or sugary drinks by 10 naira per liter. That is going to cause more confusion. It's going to cause inflation, because the price of fizzy drinks is going to increase. The people are not going to be spending more. They're going to be cutting less, because, for instance, let's say a bottle of drink costed 100 naira. It's easier to buy it than when it costs 110 naira, for instance, because clearly the prices are going to increase. So once the prices increase and more people are not buying, it's going to affect the industry too. It's going to lead to loss of jobs. It's going to lose, and so many other things. Just like the introduction of VAT costs a problem for us, which they already know. I'd like for them to reverse that sugar tax in the 2022 Finance Act. And then maybe further to that, there have been truants in the last year. There were truants, the attendance of plenary and attending to their committee work was very poor. I'd like for them to do that. And now they even have excuses. They have excuses of going for their party thing, for their re-election things, and so on. That should never get into the way of the work that they were elected to do and they're paid to do. The Constitution already spells out how many times, a minimum of how many times both houses have to meet. They flout it. They flouted it last year. They keep flouting it. Even their own House rules and Senate rules specify how many times they ought to meet. They don't do that. And please don't tell me about COVID-19, because it has nothing to do with COVID-19. It's not only Nigeria that COVID-19 affected things. Others found ways of still getting the work done. There's so much work that's not being done. They're not doing enough oversight functions on the executive, and it's as if there's no governance going on. I would really like for them to rethink their positions and come back and correct those errors.
Now, talking about apathy by lawmakers, we witnessed that in 2021. We had a situation where we didn't see as much lawmakers attending plenary sessions. Plenary sessions are getting scantier and scantier. You know, what do you think is responsible for this?
I cannot tell why the truancy. I think even they are not inspired by the kind of work they do, because they are a rubber-stamped National Assembly that simply passes whatever the executive wants without scrutiny. I think they have very poor leadership from the Senate President and the Speaker, who already declared that they are there to defend the interest of Buhari instead of defending the interest of Nigerians and being loyal to Nigeria and Nigerians and their constituencies. I think that's where they got it all mixed up. So once you get things mixed up that way, that's how there's going to be apathy. And when things get wrong, that's how they keep getting wrong.
But do you see this repeating this year, since we're going into an election year?
There is that tendency for it to repeat, and that's why we're calling on them to not do the same, and calling on Nigerians to call on them to do their job, because we cannot shut down a whole year up to May of next year simply because there are going to be elections. People have work to do. They should do their work and still do their other politicking that they need to do, but they cannot shut down the business of government for the next 1 year and 5 months simply because there's going to be an election and people want to get another term. I'm not saying that people who want to run for office again shouldn't do it, but there's still work to be done. For instance, there's the amendment of the Electoral Act that they need to do. There's the amendment of the Constitution that they have to include the referendum part, and this sugar tax they introduced that they have to rescind, and so many other things they have to do. There's that bill about mental health issues that is just lying down there that nobody's looking at. And by the way, if you look at what other paper has done, the reports they've published, there's so many of them that don't have even one bill that they sponsored in the past 2.5 years. That's supposed to be a shame, that you're elected to make laws and you don't have one bill to your name. Some don't even have one motion, not even a petition, nothing. So what have they been doing?
What kinds of legislations do you see the National Assembly prioritizing in 2022?
This Electoral Act, for instance, is one that if the National Assembly does the amendment and signed into law, it's going to be a great one for this 9th National Assembly.
They already did that. They've already done that.
They have done that, but it's not been done to conclusion. It's not a law yet. We don't have an Electoral Act, a new Electoral Act yet. They should do it to the finish and do whatever needs to be done, make the amendment that was requested, or on the basis of which an excuse was made to reject it, correct that, and simply let's have an electoral law, because we can never afford not having a new electoral law this time, so that we can start having credible elections going forward. That would be one thing that they just have to do, even if that's all they do.
Now, going into the 2023 general elections and considering the clamor for more women to be elected into the National Assembly, particularly with the bill which is calling for more seats to be added for more women to be in Parliament, how do you see this playing out? What do you think will be the fate of this bill in both houses?
I think that we've gone backwards. We've gone backwards in terms of having elected females in the National Assembly. The numbers keep dropping. If my figures are correct, the entire northern Nigeria has only one female senator, if I get my figures correct. But Anambra State alone has two of three female senators. So whereas others are making progress, others are going backwards. I think it's time for us to really think about it. It's something that we really need to focus on, and to think of how to elect more females, especially more competent females, because it's proven already. The evidence already shows that when you have more females in a board, that's even a board in the private sector, when you have more females in any, there's a shift on how things turn out. And so we actually do need more females in the National Assembly. We do need more females even in the state legislature. We need more females in elected positions. I'm not saying this to sound nice. It's just about what the evidence says.
This administration has been criticized for its borrowings, the level of borrowings, and the National Assembly has been approving these borrowings. How should the National Assembly handle requests for more borrowings from the President in 2022?
The federal government, this regime alone, has borrowed more than close to $15 trillion, close to 15 trillion naira from the CBN alone under Ways and Means. So we're borrowing way too much. We're borrowing by far too much. And the National Assembly, that's its job. Its job is oversight. Its job is representation, apart from lawmaking. So, and it's their job to approve loans, but they don't seem to scrutinize anything. They don't seem to ask any questions. Once the applications come, they simply pass them without any form of, I don't see any form of debates. They're putting Nigeria into trouble. And we're running a country based on loans. And then the loans, we use them to run recurrent expenditure. And the recurrent expenditure is even increasing instead of decreasing. So we use the monies we borrow to run recurrent expenditure, run a bloated government. We use it to service loans. And the percentages we're using in servicing loans is even increasing. So when people say that we're borrowing money to build infrastructure, that's not correct, because much of it goes into running recurrent and paying the loans. I think that they shouldn't approve more loans now. We should look at the performance of the ones we've borrowed in the past, how we're paying them, and not put ourselves into more trouble.
Well, that's the Gavel this week. Thanks for joining us. Send your feedback to thegavel@channelstv.com. I am Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.